Welcome, everybody, to this episode of the Legacy Life podcast, this conscious shift. I don't know why I named it that because it's so hard to say, conscious shift series. And today I've got an amazing guest, Heidi Steel, and we are going to be talking about unschooling. And you might be thinking, well, what is that? Well, we'll answer that question. So yeah, we'll dive straight in. Welcome, Heidi.
Hi, it's nice to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Yay.
Unschooling is my favourite subject.
Amazing. So I've got the perfect person here
Yeah.
for this subject. So I know that I have some people in my world who are already home educating, and I know I have people who are also unschooling, and I, have lots of people whose children, go to school in various capacities. So let's kick off with this answering the question of what is unschooling?
Yeah, so as you've sort of just mentioned, unschooling sort of comes under the home educating banner. So when children are educated at home, although that's a bit of a misnomer, because I don't want to give people the impression that we're only at home, because we're not. But when education is the responsibility of parents, which again is a tricky term. Oh my gosh, because actually, I mean, let's start there. Education is actually the responsibility of parents under law, everybody. All parents are responsible for the education of their children. Some parents choose to send their children to school, but actually home educating is the default. So when you choose to send your children to school, you're sort of outsourcing that to school.
Oh, that's interesting, because I didn't actually know that.
No, but until you do that, and even in fact, even whilst they're at school, it's still your responsibility to sort of make sure that the school is providing education, to make sure your children are receiving an education. Anyway, legalities and all that, things you didn't know.
But it's interesting to know about that legal side of things, isn't it?
I find it fascinating. It fascinating. I also find it fascinating how much we don't know. Like, I didn't know that until I started home educating. And I'm a qualified teacher. Like, that's sort of how one of the threads that led us to home educating is that I'm a qualified teacher, and I taught in schools for 14 years. Anyway, but unschooling, back to your question, is sort of a subsection. It's a style, let's say, a style or a way in which you can choose to home educate your child. Because once your child is home educated or being home educated, you can choose to provide that education in any way that you see fit for your child. So it doesn't have to replicate school at all. And unschooling really proves that point, because it's almost like everything you know about school tipped upside down. Anything that it's a life without school. It's life and learning without school, but almost like as if school didn't even exist. As if school didn't exist or had never existed, what would life look like? And that's what unschooling is on a day-to-day basis.
That sounds quite radical.
It has been known to be attached to the word radical. Some people call it radical unschooling. So it has been known to be quite radical. It's quite sort of like radical means from the root. It's really about instead of
let's just pause on that. Let's just pause on that word radical, meaning from the root. I love that.
Brilliant, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's brilliant. So it's instead of so in applying that to unschooling, instead of somebody else coming in and telling your children, so let's say a teacher, for example, or a curriculum, coming in and dictating and saying what they should be learning and how they should be learning it and when they should be learning it, it tips that all upside down and says, actually, do you know what? Children are born with the innate ability to learn. We are all born curious. We're all born with the natural ability to develop our skills and grow and learn in a capacity that is different for everybody. But we all have that ability, and from the roots really means nurturing that natural curiosity that children have, and really tuning into our children and how they best interact with the world and the questions that they're asking, instead of us saying, oh, you know, today you really ought to be learning, I don't know, synonyms or
whatever it is.
Whatever it is, because I'm so long ago now that I've forgotten what children learn in school, all those things. Pythagoras, we're really tuning into, right, what's my child curious about? And what kind of environment do they best operate in, and providing that for them so that they can then grow and develop in ways that suit them.
Wow. Yeah, I love how you describe it. I'm very excited about it. I'm like, oh, this sounds so cool. And
it is really cool. I love it.
Yeah. And I know, can you let people know how long you've been your children have been learning in this way, and you've been facilitating and enabling their learning in this way, moving from that being a teacher in, was it high school or primary? It was high school.
Primary. So I was primary. I was early years trained. So I had a real passion for play-based learning.
Nice.
And when my eldest came up to school age, I just thought I was a reception teacher, and I thought, no, I'm not sending him into the reception class. He was just so happy, and I just thought, no, I don't want to send him in. And someone say to him, do you know what? You can't do that anymore. You can't play with Lego anymore, because actually we've got more important things for you to be doing. And because I had studied child development and had a real passion about how children learn naturally through play, I had a confidence that we could do this. This is what we're going to do.
And you know, that's interesting that you say about that confidence, right? Because a lot of people, I'm sure, will think, well, I'm not an early years specialist, or I'm not a, you know, GCSE or Nat 5 specialist to guide my child through that stage, or if they want to do some exams or whatever. So, you know, I think being a parent, there's so much that we have to learn and so much that we have to do that you don't realize the enormity of the role, you know, before you start it. Like nobody can possibly prepare you, and then this is a whole other thing that I think can seem really overwhelming, and just like,
you say that though, but I think this is where this whole sort of conscious and gentle parenting aspect comes in, because I really genuinely believe that parents have the ability to know what's best for their children. And they are the people that are closest to their children and know their children the best, other than maybe the child themselves. You know, parents are really well equipped to do this. You don't have to be qualified, you don't have to know about child development. What you do have to have is a really strong relationship with your child, and be willing to sort of learn together. You know, sort of put aside that I know everything, I'm in control, I know what's best. And I think the sort of conscious parenting really fits that. I mean, it's inseparable, actually.
It's interesting because
really well.
Because that's what's led us to that, I suppose, really, because our daughter came out of school in January this year, so we're kind of 6 months in now to our journey, home education and unschooling journey. And you know, I've been following this gentle and conscious parenting approach for a long time, and had purposely chosen an alternative setting really as well anyway. So our child moved from a Steiner school to being at home, because we wanted I suppose a specific kind of learning, and felt that, you know, we were still very much in this mindset that somebody else is kind of better placed to support with that. So, you know, we've noticed there's been a lot of unlearning for us to do. You know, there's a lot of unlearning for us as adults to do around what we think learning is and how it has to be. And even though we might, you know, follow gentle and conscious parenting approaches and think, well, I'm not, you know, I don't want a hierarchical approach within our family. That's the way our society is set up, and that's what we were born into, that's what we've learned. And so, you know, it does kind of take this period of unlearning, you know, for us to open up into another way of being, and
Definitely.
you know, deal with the beliefs that we have around our abilities, you know, is a big part of it. And you know, I've been following you for a little while, and I've noticed, you know, there's a lot of crossover, because parenting's very like that as well. You know, it's not just about the practical tools and strategies and things. It's also a massive part of it. In fact, probably 80% of it is probably the mindset and the kind of energetics part of it. You know, us developing our confidence in terms of like you say, that trusting those instincts, and trusting that actually when you let go of the I have to be an authority, or I have to know to show my child, and actually walk alongside each other, you know, it's a different kind of approach.
Yeah, it's very, very different. It's very different to the culture that we're born into. It's very different to our experience, or a lot of our experiences growing up. So you're right, like you end up questioning a lot. And you know, there is that unlearning, and then once you've sort of unlearned, like that relearning, like what do I do? Like if this isn't working, or I don't, you know, for me, conscious parenting came when my eldest turned 2, and I had gone back to work, and I realized that like my mum would come and look after him for while I was at work for 2 days a week. And she was having a whale of a time with my 2-year-old. And I felt like the rest of the time, like I was trying to be this parent that was constantly telling him what to do, or constantly telling him what not to do, and and then she would come along and have a great 2 days with him. And I was like, do you know what? There's something I didn't, that's not what I wanted. I wanted to have a good time with my children. I wanted to enjoy them, you know, and that for me was the first step. Like I had to really question, well, if I'm not going to be authoritarian, if I'm not going to tell him what to do all the time, and we're going to like have some fun together, like how am I navigating some of the behaviors, or keeping him safe, or you know, like how are we doing that if we're not doing those strategies that other people tell us we should be doing? My eldest, by the way, is 17 now, because you asked me how long have I been doing this.
Wow.
So my children have never been to school, none of them, and I've got 4 children. My eldest is 17. I have a 15-year-old, a 12-year-old, and a 9-year-old, and they have all been unschooled from the beginning. So we've never done school at home, which is, like I said, when you're home educating, you can choose what you do.
This is a great segue.
We've never dipped into school at home. We've never followed curriculums. We've never, I don't know, you can do a Steiner approach at home. You can do a Montessori. I mean, there's just, you can mix and match. You can be eclectic. You can do it. It's amazing.
Yeah.
But we've always been quite committed to unschooling. So that's, I mean, officially, if you're talking school years, it's something like 13 years now. So
yeah,
but they've never been to school. So
amazing. So that we've swung back round, and I don't think we've talked about this actually on the podcast. I know we started talking about it a bit before we pressed record. So can you just break down for people the kind of 3 terms that we've got here, which is homeschooling, home education, and unschooling. So what's the difference?
I can do that. So homeschooling is it's actually a legal term, and it's used for children who are still registered with school but are unable to attend for whatever reason, maybe medical or mental health, or anyway, a whole plethora of reasons. And the school is still overseeing their education, but they are predominantly at home. Those children are predominantly at home. They're not accessing that within a school building. So that's homeschooling. That's home education.
So can I just interject in there? That's what everybody was doing during the pandemic, right?
Yes.
That's what everybody was doing during the pandemic.
Yeah.
We were trying to replicate school at home or follow the school curriculum and do and then the people, schools got organized and started doing some online sessions and stuff like that. And so that is homeschooling. And I think that's what people think of when they think of home education. That's like, and I know from it was when that happened that I really looked at my business, which is all around gentle and conscious parenting, and looked at how can I help people, because they're at home trying to home school their child, right? And we're all stuck together and trying to work, and it's just like so I put various things together.
It's not really another word for it, was it?
I know, just working from home with kids and different things. I'm like, how can I help people? How can I help people with this? So and I think that's what people immediately think of and think, I could possibly do that. It did not work. It was awful.
Because it doesn't, for most children, that approach doesn't work, especially when you start home educating. So home educating, you deregister from school, so your child is no longer registered at school. They no longer have a place. The school has got nothing to do with you whatsoever. You take full and utter responsibility for your child's education and what that looks like. And as I've said, that can look however you want it to look. And there are a great array there are as many ways to home educate as there are home educators. That's a phrase that is churned out quite a lot.
Yeah.
For the most part, most children do not respond well to a school at home approach, a highly structured, sort of parent is the teacher. And from a conscious parenting, it changes the dynamics of your relationship in your family. And most people very, very quickly work out that it's not fun, and it's really detrimental to your relationships with your children. And your day-to-day life becomes unbearable and very unpleasant. So people very quickly try to find different ways to educate at home. So home educating is just the point when you say, my child's not going to school. You send an official letter, deregistration letter, and they get taken off the roll, and you are responsible. So that's home educating.
That's home educating. And before you said unschooling is one of the ways.
Yes.
And there's all these different ways.
There are loads of different ways. Unschooling is the best.
I think you're a bit biased.
I think I'm very biased.
So, if you're not following that, if your children aren't at school and you're not following a homeschooling approach, then I'm sure lots of people will be thinking that, well, what do you do? You can't just do anything with your day. You've got to have some structure, right?
Well, does it? So, I mean, that's one of those unlearning things that, you can see how far that could take you. The premise of unschooling is that children are naturally curious, that children naturally want to learn things. So it's providing them a space in which they can do that. So we call that like the environment, giving them space, equipment, resources, time, opportunities. That doesn't mean you're saying they have to do something, but making them aware of what's available. I'm not suggesting you do all of this at once. That would be quite overloading. And the children just follow their interests, whether that's a nanosecond of wondering what that bird is out the window, or whether that turns into years and years and years of playing Lego. I'm talking from experience. You know, some things, sometimes they dip in and out of stuff that they're interested in. Sometimes they hop from one thing to another. Sometimes they spend weeks, you know, playing Pokemon Go. And it's really kind of maybe important to recognize, I mean, the examples I'm giving maybe give you a bit of a flavor, but it's not they're interested in geography, or they're interested in, I don't know, French, although sometimes they are. You know, it can be anything from, you know, different types of material to farm animals to, you know, clouds in the sky. It just, you just, I say, as if it's easy. You, like I said, you do it together. If you don't know the answers, you know, go to the library, Google it, ask your neighbour who's really into racing pigeons. You know, you help your child discover the answers to the things they want to find out about, or to experience the things they want to experience. My daughter's really into horses. I know nothing about horses. I don't ride, you know, but we find people that do, and we find places where she can, and facilitate. You used the word facilitate earlier. We facilitate. We make it easier for them to do the things they want to do. And you do that day in and day out. And suddenly they're 17, and you think, blimey, how did we get here?
What? So that, you know, I'm very much thinking about my listeners and thinking, what are the questions they might have, which is, you know, but what about when they get to 17 and 18, 19, 20, and they might want to go on to do things in their life, you know, that they might need exams for, or other things. So how does that kind of work? Like, I'm curious, have your children done any exams things?
No, mine haven't. Mine have not yet chosen to do that. Autonomy is very high in unschooling. But like I said, like they know it's an option. And if, for example, my eldest is really into films, so if, for example, he wanted to go and do film studies somewhere, we would then look at, right, well, what do you need to be able to qualify for that course? What's the requirements? And we would ring wherever it was, the institution where that would happen, and we would chat with them, and, you know, from there we would then work out a plan to make that possible. I certainly know children who are unschooled that have taken exams when they're 14, 15, 16. I know other children or young people that have never taken exams and gone on to set up their own businesses or do apprenticeships. I think it's really important to know that unschooling isn't about saying what you can't do. I think it actually broadens what you can do. Like, GCSEs are an option and a way, if that is useful, to help them get where they need to go. But there are lots of other routes as well. Yes, it is. It can, but like a bit like you say about the unlearning. You know, we got to my eldest being 16, although he's summer born, so sort of 15, and thinking, oh, his school peers are all doing their GCSEs right now. Like, and you know, you kind of take a bit of a breath and go, okay, do a check-in. What are we doing? Where are we at? But also I think we need to recognize that So obviously I said I did child development. Developmentally, our brains are not what we would call adult brains, fully formed into adult ready brains until your mid-20s. So in those terms, deciding on GCSEs and a career and that sort of pathway into adulthood at 16 is actually, well, actually it's before 16, isn't it? Because you have to decide when they're 14.
14, yeah.
It's actually really young.
There's a lot going on then as well, you know.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on, isn't there? You know, with puberty and everything. It's quite a lot and quite a lot of pressure.
Yeah. So, you know, it releases the expectation. There is a release of expectation. You know, expecting to do GCSEs at 16, expecting to do 10 of them, expecting to go to university. And unlike school, my children aren't told that they're failures if they haven't done it. It becomes like a means to an end. You know, it becomes like, I'm doing these GCSEs because I need them so that I can access this college or access this employment. It doesn't become about measuring how good you are at something.
Yeah, that's an interesting distinction, isn't it? Because, you know, through our lives we learn all kinds of things, don't we, that we need to learn for doing a job, or, you know, we learn these things along the way. So it's kind of starting that earlier in a way, isn't it? Yeah, interesting.
Definitely. Yeah, I find it an interesting concept because, you know, when schooled children go into GCSEs, it's about how many can they get, how many can they pass, whether they're going to pass or fail, and they've been told for many years that you know that they have to pass. This is what they're working towards. This is what it's all for. And so for them to do GCSEs and pass or fail, but fail becomes a really difficult thing emotionally to get over. You are labelled as a failure. Whereas actually my children haven't done GCSEs and they don't see themselves as failures at all. It's interesting.
I think one of the things that probably come up for people, and I know something that I thought about as well, and probably still navigating, is, you know, you talked about autonomy, which is interesting, that's one of the principles within conscious and gentle parenting as well, is you know, autonomy and independence. But I suppose, you know, this sense of, but they don't know, like, we're the parent, we've got this wider world view. You know, how can they know what is going to be useful or helpful for them to follow, you know, in terms of interests and things. So yeah, where that probably comes up for people.
So I've written down trust on my little notepad there. Because we you know, we are told from very young, when we're children, adults know best. You know, do what the adult says. You're taught when you go into school, this is like, put aside your Barbies. I don't want to hear about your Pokemon. You might be lucky to get a circle time on a Monday morning, but you know, that's Dennis put aside. You know, don't bring your favorite teddy into school. We're going to tell you this is important. You know, do your maths, do your English, you know, study Picasso, whatever it is. What you're interested in doesn't matter. I said at the beginning, didn't I? Unschooling flips everything up, and unschooling says actually what you're interested in does matter, because whilst our children are learning about what they're learning about, whether they're learning about Pokemon or Lego or Barbies, or whilst they're playing, Actually, unschooling isn't really interested in the what the subject is, or what the information is, or what the knowledge is that you're growing. It's more interested in nurturing that inner drive to learn, because we're not preparing them for this GCSE in the future. We're not learning to read when we're 4 so that we can take an exam when we're 16. Unschooling is about being equipped to learn what you need to learn when you need to learn it.
Yeah.
So if you're in school, you'll learn Pythagoras like at secondary school, years like 8 and 9. Unschooled children might not learn that, but maybe at some point in your 20s or your 30s, you have a need to know what that is. But that's okay, because you can go and find out.
Yeah.
And you don't have those layers of shame that says, oh, I can't do maths, and I can't, oh, I should have learned that when I was 12. It doesn't matter, because we know we can learn anything we want to when we want to. And we can do it without feeling bad about it. And we can do it in ways that suit us. Some people want to go and travel and see a place. Other people want to read about it in a book. Some people want to listen to music. Some people want to sing the music. And you're discovering about yourself and what works for you. So it's miles apart from what we're familiar with school. And like your question was, well, how do children know what they want to learn? Well, they know now that they want to play that. Plants versus Zombies was quite a big thing in our house as well. Plants versus Zombies on an app, and they know now that they want to read The Hobbit, and they know now that they want to ride horses, like I said, with
or bake a cake,
or bake a cake, so they have an inner knowing. And those other things, yes, as adults we do have a wider knowledge of the world, which is why I said about us giving them opportunities. My daughter can say I want to ride a horse, but she's not equipped to kind of know how that's going to happen, where to look, or what we can afford, for example, or or places. I do know her really well. I know that there are some horse riding schools that are not suitable for her, because they're not going to make her feel safe. They're not going to make her feel comfortable. Like everything's too rigid. And like you said with the authoritarian and the hierarchy, there's lots of places that replicate that. That my children aren't. Do you know what? That's a no from them. That's just not an environment they're used to. They're not used to being approached in that way. So for me, I go out and find the places that I think would be suitable for us to try. I hold that knowledge and I share it with her, and then together we decide, well, let's try this one. I'll take you there.
And what I can see is the ripple effect of that. That freedom and that trust that is what I'm hearing that you're talking about there, in terms of how you learn and how that's enabled and facilitated. And I can hear my parents going, but the thing that gets said about so many things is, but they're going to have to fit into society at some point, that they're going to have to, how are they then going to be able to operate in a job that has a hierarchical structure, as many companies will have, and I suppose my thoughts on that is, well, maybe they make different choices about what they do in their lives,
Yeah.
But I don't know what yours is.
No, that would be, some people, some unschooled young people, set up their own businesses.
Yeah.
They work with other people that have been previously unschooled that they know really well, and they work together with them. Those that go into the workplace usually go into the workplace, but they want to be there, and they find workplaces that suit them. And company, my husband works for a company and it's got a structure. There's someone who owns the company, and then there's other people, and then it's hierarchical, but actually the culture in the company that he works for is really nurturing and beautiful. So although there is a sort of clear operational structure, the way that is within the company is it's lovely. I think they've hit gold, really. They've done something really quite special in the company that he works for. So a bit like I said with the horse riding, like you find places where you fit and that suit you. The world is really big and wide, actually. There is a lot of there's space for everyone, I think, and space for you to find, or young people to find their place in it. Not everybody, sometimes people get a job as a means to an end, don't they? So they do the thing, so when we talk about that inner motivation and drive, your drive can be, I need some cash. So I will do this, and I will turn up, and I will do the thing, and I'll listen to my boss saying his thing, and then I'll go, but you're there for a purpose.
It's so interesting you saying that. I've got a flashback there. 2 years ago, I worked in a call center, and it had different departments in this call center, and I worked in a couple of different departments in there, one of which was data entry. And I was like, it was just like, I was like, but I had, when I needed to earn some money, I had a deadline, I was doing it for 2 months or something, and I had an end date, which for me meant I can do this, I can go there and do what I need to do and, fit into this structure. But I wouldn't have, I met a woman who'd been there, she was like 21, she'd been there since she was 16 or something, and I was like, I could not, for me, that wouldn't work. But for some people, they might like that structure, they might like that. So like you say, there's room for everybody in this world. I love that.
And I think when you have really been able to follow your passions and hone them as you get older, when you think about your place maybe in society and the workplace, you're already equipped to kind of know, okay, these are the sort of things I enjoy. This is what I'd really like to spend my time doing. I was smiling when you told that story, because I have a similar one. When I spent a term sealing envelopes and before the internet was a thing. Putting letters into envelopes and sealing envelopes. I went and bought a pastry brush because I'd got bored of licking all the envelopes, so I bought a pastry brush and got myself a pot of water. It was only a term, but a bit like the data entry, that's all I did. Just envelope, letter, envelope, done. Letter, envelope. Done. For a whole it was quite 3 months.
Mine was similar. It becomes like a mechanical thing.
Like factory processing.
Production line.
Yes.
Interesting. I bet everybody's had a job a bit like that.
Yes.
At some point. Yeah. But it's very much time to wrap up. We've gone a bit longer than we originally said, but I knew that was going to happen because you're great to talk.
It's inevitable. Sorry.
It is inevitable, isn't it? Is there anything you want to leave the listeners with, my gentle and conscious parenting listeners, and conscious living as well?
Yeah, do you know, I'm going to come back to that. I think as conscious parents, we can quite often feel really out of sync with what everybody else is doing and where other families are at, and I'd really come back to that point that I said about parents knowing their children and just being in tune with them and really enjoying your children. And those things are really precious. As someone who's now got a 17-year-old that's, sounds really old to me that he's 17, it is really precious, and it is really hard work, and it is really exhausting. But the relationship, and for me, that always, like that story I told about when he was 2, that for me has always been really central. That relationship that I have with my children is really precious, and I really value it. And you know, this parents just enjoying being with your children. It's okay. It's okay. It's okay to be enjoying with your children and to have fun, and to keep them safe. Do that stuff, but but the rest of it is about living together, and being. I mean, we haven't really used the word authentic as we've discussed this, but being that authentic, like when we talked about, it's okay if you don't know, it's okay if you get things wrong. It's I actually think that's better. I think it's better to be that way with our children, because like when they're 18 and 19 and 20 and then on into adulthood, the thing that we have left is the relationship with our children.
Well, it is. And as you were saying that, it made me think how I remember having a conversation with my partner, and as both kind of saying, we want our children to want to come home to visit us when they've left, and to have a great relationship with them, and and have had nice times with them. And yeah. And I know it's tricky with all the stuff that's going on in life. We're not always able to be as present as we want to be, or but I think at the end of the day, it's about doing the best that we can. And
I was just thinking,
letting go of some of the constraints for us. And that's what I'm noticing through this journey, this sense of which is quite new for us compared to your 17 years, right? It's quite new for us. But it's I think for us, and some people might be in this position, we were experiencing, anxiety-based school avoidance, and we could see it wasn't working. And when you're coming from this conscious parenting approach, and I'm, sharing that with other people, for us, it got to the point where we were like, well, we can't keep doing something that actually is out of alignment with our values. It was fine where it was, but because she didn't, when she stopped feeling safe, like you're saying, one of our jobs is to keep our children safe. Once they stop feeling safe in that setting, it's very hard to then take them somewhere, particularly when you're a conscious parent, somewhere where they don't feel safe. It's like there's a complete mismatch, So yeah. Oh, well, thank you so much for this conversation.
It's been a pleasure
to share it with everybody. Amazing. So if people want to contact you, I mean, I will put in the show notes, I will put your contact details in there. So if you want to connect further with Heidi, I know she's got a lovely community. She shares lots of information, has a book, and all of that stuff. So
yes,
come
and find out more.
Yeah.
And so my website is liveplaylearn.org, and I'll give you my links to my social pages and all that. So if you come and find out more about what we do and how we do it.
Absolutely. So check out the show notes and you'll get those there.
Okay. Thank you, Sarah.